So hi everyone, my name's Rosie Bellini. I'm a postdoc at Cornell Tech, and I'm going to be presenting this work on behalf of my collaborators. So I'll start with a story. So Riley and Alex have been together for 2 years. While Riley is asleep one night, Alex adds their fingerprint to Riley's smartphone device to get into their mobile banking application. Alex then frequently transfers themselves money from their savings account, and then also hides their activity, such as hiding the account and the expenditure from the smartphone interfaces. As soon as Riley uncovers these attacks 3 months later, they contact their bank to report fraud. However, the bank judges these transactions to be authorized and not fraudulent, because Riley has signed a user agreement that permits all transfers to be authorized from this device. Riley is now down hundreds of dollars with little ability to regain that income, and they also lack the support to address this concern. Unfortunately, Riley's experience is not uncommon, and many people will experience intimate partner violence or IPV across their lifetime. And a growing body of work has shown that technology will play a devastating role in these settings, and most recently in financial contexts. And while there's a wide variety of different technical approaches to defending systems against external and very technically sophisticated adversaries, there's actually little focus on common adversaries like Alex. But who is Alex? Well, apart from being an awful person, Frida Tal introduced this threat as the user-bound, interface-bound adversary. So they are an authenticated but adversarial user who target a person's device or account. They interact with a standard user interface, but they don't participate in any of the malicious or sophisticated software tools. So how do we tackle the challenge of people like Alex? In this work, we propose a practical but structured five-step approach to evaluating the UI-bound threat model. First, we scope known attack vectors across tech abuse and map these to identified account functionalities. Then we take a US-based sample of consumer-facing financial applications and run through a UI-bound step through and analyze their existing policy documents. We then concretize these findings into abuse scenarios, which threat model and contextualize to communicate to designers and stakeholders. And then we finally evaluate these discoveries with financial professionals and qualitative analysis. So to identify attack vectors in intimate partner violence, we scoped 89 works on tech abuse and IPV settings. And this helped us form a rough typology of the types of attacks which are relevant to financial services, as shown here with a couple of examples. And what we did was we broke these attacks down into specific adversarial user flows. So for example, if I was to conduct fraudulent payments, we'd need a rough user flow from opening the banking application to approving the transfer. And this approach is borrowed from the UI analysis that you sometimes see in accessibility literature. We then applied these step-through patterns on a selectively sampled set of 30 consumer-facing smartphone technologies, which we identified as key area for adversaries. So this was broken into 13 mobile banking applications and 17 peer-to-peer payment applications. And this included some big names such as Chase, TD Bank, Venmo, and Cash App, which are regularly used by US consumers. So 4 researchers interacted with the interfaces, interacting as if they were adversaries like Alex, including compromised device access, compromised authentication, and then also using authentication information to create false accounts. So this included making new accounts to evaluate the level of authentication required, documenting the exposure of financial information to transactions on accounts, and also having a look at payment protections for sending limits, anti-harassment controls. And we did this for a wide range of different types of technical attacks. So what did we find? Well, we found that mobile banking and peer-to-peer payment applications are broadly under-equipped to respond to this threat. Among our other discoveries, we found that when we added fingerprints like Alex to Touch ID or fingerprint or lock, we actually found that none of the peer-to-peer payment applications forced a user to log out, or actually alerted them to a change in biometrics. And this means that adversaries can easily make adversarial but unauthorized payments from the phone. We also could change PIN numbers, and we could also view credit card information. And when we were a little bit happier that all of the mobile banking did force a lockout, several of them only notify a user of this biometric change through a very vague message. So for example, while it will kick you out, it would say biometrics are currently unavailable as a login method, which is actually the error message that the server side kicks out when they're having problems with biometrics. And we realized as well that design might never actually itself be able to completely stop tech abuse, and motivated adversaries like Alex will still find a way around our defenses. So what we did was we conducted a content analysis of the terms of service and acceptable use policies to actually identify how liable survivors such as Riley would be in cases like account compromise. And sadly, our analysis found very lax descriptions around the liability for compromise that really very rarely cover the reality for survivors. So for instance, wording such as banning impersonation does not actually ban or prevent device or account compromise. While the use of an account not belonging to them, such as this terminology here, is actually sidestepped often through joint ownership, which is quite common amongst couples. But most devastatingly, we found that in the majority of cases, it actually clearly stated that the account holder was responsible for the other person using their credentials, which is really at odds with the situations of coercion or deception, such as the example in which I gave. Riley hasn't been slack with their authentication information. Someone has actually added other types of ways of getting into their account. And we found multiple instances of these very concerning insights over interface design and policy design, and a full list can actually be seen in our paper. So to help communicate our findings with stakeholders, we used adversarial learning and professional experience in working with survivors firsthand to try and synthesize our discoveries into 3 textual descriptions, which we call abuse scenarios. So these are hypothetical events which interact with a digital system, which reasonably lead to abuse. These were platform agnostic, and they provided a broad coverage of the range of attacks we modeled in our step through. And the story of Alex and Riley is just a slight variation of the short one that we used to discuss with financial experts. So to validate our findings on our UI-bound threat model in this setting and also evaluate our methodological approach to auditing, we conducted 13 interviews with 12 financial experts with first-hand experience of working with survivors of intimate partner violence spread across financial services such as banks and insurance companies to nonprofit organizations such as refuges. So we asked them about tech abuse and financial abuse and their actual response to these kind of threats using these 3 abuse scenarios. And we analyzed their responses using Lewis and Ritchie's framework analysis. So our abuse scenarios actually proved pretty successful, and we found out quite a lot more about UI-bound adversaries than we'd initially thought. And one of these is understanding the contextual risk factors which cause UI-bound adversaries. So for example, while we expected peer-to-peer payment application used to actually match other literature, this suggests that actually they're mostly kind of used in social settings such as reimbursing a friend for a meal. We actually found that in these contexts, peer-to-peer payment applications are actually used by many survivors as an essential lifeline, particularly when a main bank account has been taken over. So for instance, this support service manager actually explains that they had several accounts of survivors using this as an emergency fund, which is an escape fund to be able to leave an abusive relationship. And our scenarios, because they were narrative, because they were fictional, also identified lots of other similarities to other at-risk groups. So in this instance, we had a financial policy researcher sharing a personal explanation that in their personal experience of one of their elderly parents actually being targeted with a similar threat model. So actually they were saying that this particular person, while external to the organization, was actually able to get into her bank accounts through tablets and phones. Unfortunately, this poor survivor is also quite embarrassed by the fact that this happened to them. And this actually suggests that our abuse scenarios are actually fairly representative of actual accounts that are happening in the field. And while most participants agreed that actions need to be taken to address UI-bound adversaries, there are some challenges. Many professionals actually need far more than just a theoretical attack, such as an abuse scenario, to make a business case for changes to policy or practice. So as this contractor explains, they need a lot more than just saying that these are theoretical abuses of the system in order for them to be able to offer the data, to be able to make the changes. And we found that this was actually an extremely common response when we did the responsible disclosure and the bug bounty for all of the services in which we audited. So our study has raised a host of new questions, but one of the most prevalent ones to me was the fact that multiple at-risk groups face a range of digital safety concerns. And we saw that survivors of intimate partner violence actually raise really valuable insights from other at-risk groups, such as elders and the targets of other financial crimes. But since there are quite a lot of different at-risk groups out there, to try and balance this issue around scale, but also reduce this temptation of conflating lots of different types of vulnerabilities together, there's quite a lot of potential for common threat models that have modules which might be customizable to different groups, such as journalists or gig workers. And then second, whilst our scenarios might motivate and engage quite already sympathetic financial experts, there is a real need for professionalization around UI-bound adversary testing and auditing, and this is to make a business case that leads to system change. So I anticipate that there's going to be some forensics and metrics that are going to be able to simulate UI-bound adversaries, which could be a very valuable direction to pursue, particularly in the areas of privacy threat modeling and also social insider flagging. So that's all I have time for today. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm ready to take on some questions. Thank you.